Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to 2 roasts on an AeroPress, an exercise in brew recipe development. This presentation is part of the No Filter Coffee Festival. So if you have a lot of fun this morning, make sure to go to nofiltercoffeefest.com at the end of this presentation. You'll find a full list of all the presentations from specialty coffee roaster retailers all throughout the Southeast, happening all this week on Instagram Live. Now, I'm Chelsea. I direct training programs here at JoeVanGoghCoffee. We're located in Hillsborough, North Carolina, and we're a specialty coffee roaster retailer. And so many staff members at JoeVanGo love traveling, we love being outdoors, we're really on the go kind of people. So this brew method, the AeroPress, is one of our favorite brew methods. It's super durable, it's super adaptable, it's really easy to use, and it's really easy to clean. So today we're going to be diving into this brew method a little bit further. Just a quick note, the coffees that I'm using this morning as well as the AeroPress are going to be available online at JoeVanGoghCoffee.com. Log on if you have a chance. We'd really appreciate it if you do. Check us out, get to know us and our story. So without further ado, let's look at the AeroPress here this morning. If you are totally new to the AeroPress, you've never brewed with this method before, this is going to be a great opportunity for you to get to know the core techniques for brewing a great cup of coffee with this method. If you're more experienced brewing with the AeroPress, this will also be a really great exercise because we're going to show you how to take a basic AeroPress recipe and tweak it a little bit so that your favorite coffee exceeds your expectations each and every time on this method. Okay, so to recap where we were, 3 components of the AeroPress brewer that you'll need. You'll need a brew chamber, the bigger of the 2 cylinders. This is where the coffee and the water are going to interact, make our delicious beverage. You'll also need the smaller of the 2 cylinders. This is the plunger, which we will use to push the coffee out of the brew chamber once we finish brewing. You'll also have a cap, and this is what we're going to attach to the hexagonal shape on the brewing chamber. It's also where the filter is going to go, and we'll talk a little bit more about filtration as we start moving into our exercises. Now, with no further ado, let's get brewing. I'm going to be using the inverted method for the AeroPress today, so I'll walk you through how to set that up. I have a gram scale, which can be helpful for consistency. I also have a kettle full of hot water. You'll want to heat your water to about 200 degrees Fahrenheit. That's going to be perfect for getting us a super delicious cup of coffee. I also have the handy dandy stirring tool that comes with the AeroPress brew kit, some coffee of course, and a mug, a very sturdy mug that we can press into, which I will be demonstrating shortly. So I have the plunger component of the AeroPress turned so that the opening is down on the scale. I'm going to take the brew chamber and flip it over, hence the inverted name. And we are going to insert the plunger just enough to create a watertight seal. So keep pushing until you see that plunger hit the bottom of the number 4. And that means you have a good watertight seal going for yourself. So I am going to go ahead and add some coffee to this AeroPress. The first experiment that we're going to be doing today is with our darker roast. I'm brewing with JoeVanGogh's espresso blend. Honestly, this coffee is of course super great when prepared on an espresso machine. It's also really exquisite when brewed manually. And this is one of my favorite methods to drink it. So I am going to add 18 grams of ground coffee to this chamber with a handy dandy little cone. So here's one thing that we can think about when we think about brewing a dark roast on the AeroPress, really with any method. All coffee that's roasted undergoes a variety of chemical reactions inside of the roaster, Maillard reaction, for example. And the dark roast sort of moves through those reactions to a greater extent than our lighter roasted coffees. giving us the potential for flavors like chocolate, nut, this sort of roasty, toasty flavor profile in the cup. And we really want a method, a recipe that allows us to highlight those attributes. So where I'm going to start here, of course we've got our 18 grams of coffee, I'm going to add 180 grams of water to the brewing chamber. And what this is going to do, this combination of coffee and water, we're of course going to kickstart our brewing process. There's a concept called brew ratio that's really valuable to think about when you're constructing a recipe. It's the relationship between the amount of dry coffee that we're using and the amount of water that we're using to extract that coffee. This particular recipe is a 1 to 10 brew ratio, 18 grams of coffee to 180 grams of water. And this is going to support a texture that is really thick, really nice and velvety, and really accentuate those bold flavors that we're looking for. So I'm gonna start a timer just to keep track of how long the coffee and the water have been hanging out. And I'm going to add that 180 grams of water to the chamber. And once I get there, I'll just take my little stirring tool and give it 3 gentle stirs to ensure that all of the grounds are saturated. So we talked about this brew ratio being supportive of that really nice texture in the cup. Sometimes you'll hear coffee professionals talk about the body of the coffee or the mouthfeel of the coffee. Really, we're just talking about the texture and finding a texture that really has a nice synergy with the flavors that we're looking to showcase in the cup. So brew ratio is one way that we can support a nice, bold, rich, smooth body. There's another thing that we can do. We need to attach a filter to this AeroPress so that when I flip it over and start to press the coffee into the cup, we're of course going to hold all of the coffee grinds back. So I have a reusable metal mesh filter for this particular recipe that I'm going to insert into the cap here and attach, very carefully, to the AeroPress. Here's what's cool about metal filters. They're reusable, which of course is a great sustainability perk. They're also going to help with this strategy that we have to really accentuate and really heighten the sense of body in this coffee. The metal filter is going to allow a lot of insoluble content to pass through the filter into your beverage, like oils, for example. Now you may be thinking, why do I want oils in my cup of coffee? When it comes to accentuating the mouthfeel of a cup of coffee, the more insoluble content present in the cup, the sort of greater sense of texture that we're going to have when we drink it. So hopefully, we're gonna get those roasty, toasty flavors. We're also going to get that really bold body in the cup. So I'm allowing the coffee and the water to interact for about 2 minutes and 45 seconds total. Once that time goes by, I'm actually going to take my cup, place it on the top of the AeroPress, and I'm gonna flip it. A little bit of suspense for our brewing exercise today. And what you'll see me do is flip the AeroPress onto the cup, and I will take it off of the scale. I'm about to start pressing the coffee down into my vessel, and I really, really, really don't want to press onto the scale because I am going to be using a little bit of force. So here we go. We're flipping, and we're pressing. So we want to take about 30 seconds to gradually press the coffee out of the brewing chamber. And you may or may not be able to hear this with the video, but I'm pushing until I hear a hissing sound. And that means I successfully pushed all of the beverage out, and there's just air passing through the filter at that point. Ooh, get my workout this morning. Okay, we have a hissing sound, which means we have successfully brewed our dark roast coffee. So that is a quick introduction to the inverted method, and we have a couple of good tips for accentuating the flavors in our cup. I'm going to try this really quickly, and then we'll get our light roast started. Nice. So we've got these really nice roasty toasty flavors. We have this sense of almost smoky dark chocolate, really, really beautiful in the cup. And by using a 1:10 brew ratio and that reusable filter, we've really accentuated the weight and the texture, giving you this really velvety sensation when you go to drink it. So I would really enjoy a cup of coffee like that, maybe on a cold morning. Maybe if I was having a dessert of some kind with it, think about like if you have a really sweet cake and you have like a really dark chocolate sauce on said cake. That nice natural bitterness of the chocolate really cuts through the sweetness in a pleasant way. So this cup of coffee would be a really nice accent to any kind of sweet treat that you would want to have. Now, to keep us going here, I'm going to just reset my scale and go ahead and get us set up to prepare a light roasted coffee. Now, we talked about how a dark roast has undergone a greater degree of those roasting chemical reactions. A lighter roast, not so much. We don't experience the Maillard reaction to quite the same degree. So the flavors that we tend to get in the cup tend to be flavors that were imparted into the coffee bean at other parts of its journey. Maybe when the coffee bean was still part of a fruit on a plant at the farm. Maybe after the coffee was harvested, and it was processed in a specific way. We get these characteristics like fruit, floral, really interesting, adventurous tasting notes in lighter roasted coffees, which can be super exciting. So I have set up my inverted method. I've gone ahead and added 18 grams of ground coffee to the brewing chamber. Now, we're going to use, at least to start, the same brew ratio that we used to prepare our dark roast, that 1:10 ratio. We are going to add a little trick later in the process to highlight some of the unique attributes of this coffee. So more about that in a second. Let me add my water. And just to keep our smaller variables consistent, we still have our water heated to about 200 degrees. We're still going to give our chamber a few gentle stirs after I get there. Now, one thing I may not have mentioned yet, for our light roast today, I am brewing Joe Van Gogh's Don Victor Honduras. We've carried this coffee seasonally for at least a couple years now, and every season it keeps getting better. So super excited to share it with you today. This coffee has some really exquisite fruit-forward characteristics. So we really want a recipe that allows us to highlight that super complex acidity and a recipe that gives us a body that's a little more clear, a little lighter on the palate, and it really allows those nuanced flavor notes to shine through. So, in an effort to really allow those flavors to shine through, I'm gonna do a few things. We have a brew ratio trick up our sleeve, still going to hold off talking to you about that for one more minute here. I am going to go ahead and insert a paper filter into my cap. Now, we talked about how a metal filter allows a lot of insoluble content to pass through, giving us a heavier body. The paper filter is going to hold more of that insoluble content back, oils and the like, is going to stay in the filter, giving your cup of coffee a more clear, silkier texture, which is going to allow those unique flavor attributes to shine through even more. So I'm just gonna preheat my paper filter here, just to rinse out any papery taste. We'll attach this to the top, and we'll get ready for our flip. Now, the trick that I've promised you. There is a trick in AeroPress brewing where you can consistently brew a short and strong cup of coffee. That's what we've been doing with this 1:10 brew ratio. One of my favorite things to do with lighter roasted coffees is still brew with that ratio, but use a trick called bypass. After the beverage is finished brewing, it sort of looks like I'm watering down my cup of coffee, but what I'm actually doing is adding enough water so that those flavors, those sweet, fruity flavors, can come through with more clarity. So let me go ahead and flip, and then I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about with the bypass. So we'll flip, here we go. And we'll push. So what I'm gonna do is after I'm finished pushing here, and my coffee is in my cup, I'm going to place my cup back on the scale. Right now we have a pretty short, strong cup of coffee, and I want to adjust the brew ratio after the fact to accentuate those characteristics that we're excited about, those fruit-forward characteristics. So, in order to do that, I am simply going to zero out my scale, take my same water, and I'm going to add about 50 grams of water to my cup. And that's going to give us more like, maybe like a 1 to 14 brew ratio once you actually do the math and factor in that water that we just added. I'll give it a little stir. So what I've done there is I've taken the texture from a place of really thick and velvety, taken it to more of a place of like delicate, tea-like, and silky, which will really allow the naturally occurring characteristics, these sort of blackberry notes, to shine through in this particular coffee. So let's try this. I think very hot is the first thing, but we do get a sense of a lighter weight on the palate, some really nice, sweet, fruit-forward characteristics. So again, 2 easy tricks that we can use with AeroPress brewing. We have brew ratio that we can adjust to give us a different sense of mouthfeel or texture in the cup. We have the type of filter that we can use. Now, one other thing that I didn't tell you all about as I was brewing that's a great variable to experiment with at home is your grind size. We used a pretty fine grind for both of these recipes, but there was a minute difference in the setting for each of these coffees. We used a slightly finer grind setting for our lighter roasted coffee, and that was simply because the lighter roasted coffee is a little bit more dense. It's a little bit harder for the hot water to penetrate and pull out those really delicious sweet flavors. So to kind of help it along a little bit, we made the grind size a little bit finer and increased the surface area that the water could actually make contact with and start pulling out those really delicious flavors that we were looking for. So when you're at home playing with your AeroPress, think about which variable you can adjust, how you can set up an experiment for yourself to see what you love more. A great thing about that bypass technique that we tried is really you can brew a short, strong cup of coffee and then just add water a little bit at a time until you find a texture that you really enjoy. Oh, the phone is ringing. I was going to say, are there any questions? Perhaps someone is calling in with a question. Let's see. Yeah, if you have a question and want to put it in the comments, we have just a couple minutes left here, so I'm happy to answer any questions that you all have. AeroPress gave us 4 thumbs ups. That's so exciting. Your brewer is awesome, y'all. Thank you. Any questions, y'all, about brewing with the AeroPress? Was wondering what metal filter you used. Oh, that's a really great question. Robbie, do you know the brand of this metal filter? It's Robbie's metal filter, y'all. It's a really great filter.
It was the first one that came out, and I don't.
It was the first one that came out. It's so vintage, we don't even know what brand it is.
I have to read on the.
But you can definitely do a quick Google search. There are all sorts of reusable filters out there. I saw a question about water temperature. You want anywhere between 195 and 205. That's going to give you a really great extraction. It's going to give you the best flavors. Other questions? They came in so fast I may have missed them, so apologies if I missed your question. Oh, y'all are great. Y'all have filter options. Thank you for being my Google search thing. Oh, the brew ratio. Yeah, great question. So we used a 1 to 10 brew ratio, 18 grams of coffee to 180 grams of water. Now, when we actually bypassed and added some water back to the light roast, we landed in more of a space of 1 to 14, 1 to 15. I will say, if you're preparing other brew methods at home, like a pour over, I'm usually more in a place like 1 to 16. This particular brew method, because of its immersion style, is super great with really short, strong, punchy cups of coffee. So I find that I drink coffees that, you know, really wake you up in the morning when you drink them. Brew ratio / brew recipes. Okay, yeah, we talked about brew ratio. So 1 to 10 for your more bold, short, strong cups of coffee. Anywhere up to 1 to 16 if you find that you like something that's just a little bit, you know, smooth, round, easy to drink. In terms of brew recipe, yeah, start with 18 grams of coffee ground, like between fine and very fine. And 2 minutes and 45 seconds for your brew time. Push down over the course of 30 seconds for a total of 3 minutes and 15 seconds. All right, y'all. I think, why not just brew it as a 1 to 14 without a bypass? Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, you have options. So I do have the option of simply adding a little bit more water directly to the AeroPress, or brewing the short, strong cup of coffee and then diluting it to a 1 to 14 brew ratio. Honestly, one reason I went with the bypass today is so that beginners had an easier time following along. We left the core recipe consistent, just added something back after the fact. But yeah, you'll get a little bit of variation in your result if you brew concentrated and then bypass, or if you just brew with the ratio that you're going for from the get-go. You may need to just play with your grind setting to find something that works for you. All right, y'all, I think we've hit, I'm getting waves that say we've hit the end of our time. So I think we've hit the end of our time. Thank you all so much. Again, yeah, check out nofiltercoffeefest.com for the other presentations happening throughout the week. Check out JoeVanGoghCoffee if you're interested in any of the coffees that we tasted together today. Yeah, thanks for joining us, y'all. Take care.